Welcome to an oral history of the University of Laverne, a series created during Laverne's 125th anniversary year, 2016-2017, by the students and faculty of Honors 304-351. I'm Al Clark, Professor of Humanities, and I co-taught this course with Brian Best, Assistant Director of Instructional Technology, who is part of the regional and online campuses administration. This series is based primarily on oral histories contained in the university's archives in Wilson Library. Although some of the footage you will see was professionally filmed, most of the oral histories were shot with amateur equipment and with the intention of transcribing them onto paper, not screening them before audiences. Consequently, the sound and video quality in these oral histories is uneven at best. I personally created this episode of an oral history of the University of Laverne. In it, I paint the first quarter century of the school's history with very broad strokes, emphasizing those things that are most visual. I call this episode Lordsburg Academy Becomes Laverne College. Let's start from the beginning. Why is Laverne where it is, here in the eastern San Gabriel Valley, as it is seen from the air about 1985? Well, why is anything in our capitalist society located where it is? Ask any realtor. It's location, location, location. Look closely at this aerial view and you will see the Sports Science and Athletics Pavilion and the football field a little below the center of the photograph. And what creates the steel border just south of the field? In 2016, it is the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, but in 1885, when the tracks were first laid, it was the Southern California Railroad, soon to become part of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Transcontinental Railroad. A great competition was underway among competing railroad companies in the 1880s to build track, sell land, and make fortunes. This corporate rivalry ignited the first real estate boom in Southern California in 1887. A rate war to bring passengers west on the new railroads combined with get-rich-quick real estate promoters to produce some 32 towns along the Santa Fe track in the San Gabriel Valley, where Chaparral and Sage formerly reigned supreme, including Azusa, Glendora, San Dimas, and Lordsburg, illustrated here in the replica town clock which stands on the southeast corner of Bonita and D. No one needed to know the exact time before the railroad came with exacting and unforgiving schedules, so every community that survived soon erected a prominent timepiece near the center of town. A train station was constructed where the Oaks Dormitory now stands, as commemorated by this stone and this plaque. The station sat at E and First on this replica map of Lordsburg in 1887, created in tile at Lordsburg Park, a block east of the university's shuttle lot on Walnut Street. The core of the university today covers the block south and west of where the cross is on the map. Every town company constructed one prominent building on the empty town site, a showpiece to attract potential buyers. Nothing much has changed in real estate promotion over the years. The hotel built in San Dimas still stands at 121 North San Dimas Avenue. Now known as the Walker House, it never had a paying customer. Neither did the Lordsburg Hotel, completed in 1888, just after the boom of 1887 had crashed, like so many subsequent real estate bubbles in Southern California. It was a glorious monument to human vanity with sumptuous decoration in hand-carved wood. Here is the tympanum above the main steps facing the railway to the south. It is a fuzzy image snapped with a cell phone from the enlarged photograph of the hotel building on the north wall of Wilson Library. In the exact center, you can see something that looks like the integer 19. The 1 is actually a side view of the capital letter alpha carved in wood, and the 9 is actually a capital omega, the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. Here is the same alpha today displayed in Wilson Library. Now look at the base of the tympanum, just below the alpha and omega. What do you see? 3 numbers 8, what then remained from the date that the hotel was erected, 1888. And here are the 2 remaining 8s in the archives case in Wilson Library. Finally, flanking the 88 are bunches of oranges, also carved in wood, such as these from the cultural and natural history collections currently on display in Lefebvre foyer. Next to the oranges in the Lefebvre display case is this post from the hotel with a shadowy glimpse of the photograph of Lordsburg founder I.W. Lord on the wall behind. The case also holds one of the century-and-a-quarter-old windows from the long-gone hotel, in this display framing the portraits of the 4 bearded founders of Lord. Other objects from the hotel building spread around Laverne's campus are a section of flooring, shown here in the restored Hannawalt House. Something else familiar survived from the hotel's glory days.
Side of the library on 2nd Street, there are palm trees. Most of those are original 1888. The year the hotel was finished, those palms were planted.
You can spy their fronds hanging over 2nd Street in this aerial photograph from 1922, but the semi-tropical trees and dusty 2nd Street are about 25 yards south of the old building, which nearly touch 3rd Street on the north. The front steps of Lordsburg College building sat about where the Wilson Library circulation desk is today. Directly above that circulation desk, where the college offices, auditorium, dining room, and classrooms once opened onto paneled corridors, one can see a spindle, a redwood wall panel, and a door from one of the former hotel rooms shoved under the staircase outside classroom 248. That surviving spindle recalls the one in the alcove above the words Lordsburg College in the crowning 4th floor tympanum of the hotel building shown here. But what would become of this Victorian white elephant after the real estate boom crashed? Future President C. Ernest Davis reflects on it 70 years later.
Out to be a bust. The Lordsburg Land and Hotel Company looked around for somebody to buy an empty hotel.
Despite the real estate bust, or more likely because of it, Easterners and Midwesterners continued to migrate into California. Unlike later migrations, some of the people came as groups, as colonies of related families or people.
So some brethren were interested in colonizing, moving west, like a lot of people did. And so some entrepreneurs worked with the railroads to get together large groups of brethren from all over to come to Butte Valley and other areas in California. Laverne was one of those areas.
This map from Gladys Muir's first book, Settlement of the Brethren on the Pacific Slope, A Study in Colonization, published in 1939, 1 year after Chuck Davis's father assumed the presidency of Laverne, illustrates the large number of Brethren colonies in Southern California. As a young man finishing off his degree at Laverne, the future president would visit his fiancée on his way back to school from the former Butte Valley colony.
School, they lived at Empire, which is outside of Modesto. Also one of these communities that was formed by a cooperative community, by the way, that was formed by brethren coming to that area. And there's still a church there in Empire.
After months of negotiation over terms and price, a colony of brethren agreed to settle in Lordsburg. The 4 founding trustees, David Coons, Henry Coons, Daniel Hauser, and Samuel A. Overholzer, to whom Founders Hall is dedicated, purchased the hotel and the land beneath it to found Laverne College.
The University of Laverne was started primarily by immigrants from Pennsylvania who came to California to work in agriculture and who established a university because they believed in the value of higher education.
After intelligent preparation, Lordsburg College opened in the fall of 1891 with this mixture of young teachers, scattered in the back row in this school photograph, adolescents in the middle rows, and barefoot children dominating the front. Note the careful details in post and beam in the then still pristine gingerbread house. Significantly, the 76 enrolled included not only the children of the Pennsylvania Brethren, about whom Provost Reed spoke, but also the descendants of early Californios, such as Ignacio Vejar, Alessandro Yorba, Porfirio Palomares, and Carrie Vejar. In this sense, Laverne was Hispanic serving from its inception. While the faculty were ready to teach college-level courses, however, the students were definitely not. So Lordsburg College almost immediately became Lordsburg Academy, offering secondary school education rather than post-secondary education, something that some other colleges in Southern California also experienced. Indeed, as the photograph from the centennial history of the University of Laverne unmistakably shows, the first class included at least as many grammar school-age pupils and high school and college-age students, so that year the grammar, or what they called the model training department, may well have had the largest enrollment. Nevertheless, as this diploma on the north wall of Wilson Library confirms, there was at least one graduate of Laverne College Academy in 1891-1892. The commercial department was one of the 8 departments at the school, distinct from the collegiate department, the only one 2016 would probably call college level. Note that the recipient, J. Clinton Whitmore, was being cheerfully recommended to the business public as an intelligent accountant, and that the names and seal were affixed on June 19, 1892. Mr. Whitmore was not included in the fall 1891 photograph on the porch of the hotel, so he may have registered in spring 1892. While partly illegible, the thick seal clearly states Corporate Seal, Lordsburg College, and includes the remnants of hanging cords in traditional practice. The penmanship, in contrast, is clear and distinct, providing insight into institutional hierarchy and Whitmore's course of study. Mary E. Robertson was professor of language, showing that Whitmore took composition from a collegiate-level professor. His commercial training was also included shorthand, typewriting, and elocution, commercial subjects taken from the commercial department teacher Maggie Nofsinger. It is significant that typewriting was included because typewriters were an incoming technology in 1892. Whitmore's education apparently was not enlightened by music, poetry, painting, or geography, despite this pensive graphic decorating his sheepskin. Whitmore's study did include numbers, however, presumably accounting, so Solomon Hendricks, professor of mathematics, also signed his diploma. Like the other signatories, and unlike practice on current diplomas, Hendricks personally signed his own hand. S.S. Garst signed as principal, not as president, no doubt because this diploma was from the commercial department, not from the collegiate department. Nevertheless, later generations would list S.S. Garst as the first president of Laverne College, shown here in a History of Brethren Higher Education published in 1923. Garst left the college after 1 year, and the institution struggled for the next 10, as underscored by the fact that a succession of 3 presidents followed him before the turn of the century. E. A. Miller, 1892 to 1899, I. N. H. Beam, 1899, W. I. T. Hoover, 1899 to 1901. In fact, of the 18 presidents of Laverne thus far inaugurated, over half of them served by 1921, a little more than a quarter century after Lordsburg College opened its doors. The institution offered a solid, values-oriented education, but it struggled to attract sufficient students to become sustainable financially. As the plaque in Founders Hall reminds its readers, the four founders bore most of the financial burdens for the first 10 years of existence. In 1901, when the weight of finance became too heavy, the trustees closed the college, uncertain if or when it would ever reopen. What the plaque fails to mention, however, is that a determined new leader, W.C. Hanawalt, traveled from Pennsylvania to give the institution a new start. He leased the building for 5 years to offer high school academy work. When the Hanawalt party arrived in September 1902, 3 students were already enrolled: Grace Hilleman, Annie Nelson, and Conchita Palomares. The institution incorporated as the Laverne College Association, as shown on this corporate seal on the diploma of Annie Nelson, one of the 3 students, dated May 17, 1906, 4 years after she started her studies, the first person to receive an academy diploma under president. The diploma hangs on the wall in the current conference room of the Hanawalt House, built in 1905 by President Hanawalt as his personal residence across the street from the college. Not by sudden flight, as an owl might do, but step by step through books and the light of knowledge. Nelson completed the academic course at the Academy, her diploma being signed by President W.C. Hanawalt and another future head of the institution, J.M. Cox. One of the other 3 Academy students, Grace Heilman, is seated in the front row, third from the left in the 1914 photograph, by then having become Mrs. Grace Miller. The large bearded man standing in the back row of Lordsburg College's assembled Bible department is P.J. Wiebe, who made history that year by becoming the first person ever to earn a college degree from Lordsburg College. Prior to Wiebe in 1914, all diplomas represented graduation from high school. Grace Miller, through her teaching and philanthropic work, would make history in her own right. Today, there is a plaque to her achievements in the social hall of the Laverne Church of the Brethren, and Grace Miller's school in Laverne is named in her memory. In addition, she was the grandmother to a future president of Laverne, Stephen Morgan. Her daughter, Lois, standing next to her, 82 years later, told Marlon Heckman and Bill Neal how local Brethren women contributed to the upkeep of Lordsburg Academy in order to keep it open.
I think you said that in the summers the women used to come and clean the hotel, and what did you kids do?
We played around, and then the boys, some of those boys even got up on top of that dome and scared us girls much. But we youngsters, we weren't asked to dust and work. I guess we were too young. But the ladies worked, and they worked in the kitchen too. And the kitchen was the back of the building on the northwest side. And the dining room was next, and then the auditorium. And the ladies would can many cans of fruit and maybe some vegetables and made apple butter. And that was to use for the meals and in the winter when it came along.
Lois Miller Thomas, a piano major, also vividly recalled 2 members of the faculty whom Hanawalt brought to Laverne: Benjamin Haw, in charge of the music department into the 1930s, and his wife Laura, who headed the elocution department, shown together at the top right of this photograph of the Lordsburg's faculty under President Hanawalt, Brodham Center, in 1904-05.
So then when I was an 8th grader, he said, "But you sing. Lois can sing." Grace sent her down to our lyric club, which meets at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And school in my days, was out at 3. And so that's when I started in the music department of the academy. And then when I went to the academy, I started taking music lessons from B.S. Hall again. And taking lessons on the organ by B.S. Hall, but we always call him B.S., said, Lois, she can come over and practice on our grand piano.
Even though the college under Hannawalt seemed to be prospering, the financial burden fell heavily on his shoulders because under him the only income was tuition. When the trustees decided to ask the District of Southern California Church of the Brethren to hold in trust the college's stock and funds as a means of shoring up finances, Hannawalt resigned. When the president appointed by the trustees became ill, the trustees asked J.M. Cox of the business department to become chair of the faculty and supervise the college as acting president in 1908-1909. Cox's interim presidency ended with the appointment of W.F. England, who stayed only 2 years, 1909 through 1911. Edward France, who had come to California for his health, was president for 4 years, 1911 through 1915, with the help during part of this time by J.P. Dickey, who served as vice president in 1911-1912. Finally, some stability arrived with Samuel J. Miller, who came as president in 1915 and served until 1921, despite the Great War in Europe, with its draft that drew men from Lordsburg's faculty and student body. It helped that the war ended midway through his presidency and brought some normalcy to Laverne. Surely the most lasting legacy of this unstable period is Miller Hall, built as Ladies' Hall, soon to celebrate its centennial, here shown under construction with President Miller on the far right. Clearly, Brethren attire was required for this photograph taken a century ago. Miller Hall was the first building constructed specifically for the college. Ladies' Hall opened in September 1918, just before the armistice in Europe, with some distinctive features. Virginia Stark, whose father, C. Ernest Davis, took classes at the academy and college and later served as its president, described these features, which were still present when she lived in Miller Hall 3 decades later.
For the girls, that was Miller Hall. Mm-hmm. We had sleeping porches on the sides. That made the rooms really quite spacious because you didn't have to have beds in there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, first and second floor.
Oh. So the in rooms, the in sections, essentially.
Well, it was an open, it was a one section, open. There was no division.
But it was inside the building.
Inside the building. But it had a screen porch on.
I see.
So it was cool. And like I said, it made your room very spacious.
Right. So what did you say?
We had a little sink there.
Oh.
Each room had a sink, so you could brush your teeth and drink whatever. But then you could have a desk and a couch.
Another legacy of the Miller period is a critically distinctive feature of the university today.
It was Lordsburg Academy that I entered in 1910. The college was named after the town.
The students at the college decided they didn't like the name Lordsburg College. The athletic teams were teased about being from Jesusville or Godsville. So they petitioned the trustees, we need a new name for the college. And they went through a whole series of names and came up with Palmyra College. So in the archives at the library, we had a handbook of Palmyra College, intended to be for the year 1913 and 14. The college publication was changed from the Lordsburg Educator to the Palmyrian, and it lasted 9 volumes. But Mr. Lord, who never lived here, heard about it, he read about it in the newspaper, and he took the trustees to court, and the trustees caved in and backed off. And so it remained Lordsburg College. In March of 1917, Mr. Lord died. In August of 1917, the college and the town took the name Laverne. Mrs. Bixby had her ranch up north, and you know Laverne Heights School, that was always Laverne in the name of ranches and so on. And the crate labels for that period are Laverne, Lordsburg Laverne label, and so that's where the name.
The building of Ladies' Hall, the future Miller Hall, required a capital campaign, the first in the institution's history. Proposed by President Miller in early 1917, it was approved, launched, and nearly completed before the United States entered the Great War at the end of the year. A professional fundraiser was employed, and architects drew up a 6-building master plan called Greater Laverne College. The campaign was for $100,000, of which $40,000 would build the Ladies' Hall, and the remaining $60,000 would complete what became Founders Hall. $69,000 of the $100,000 had been pledged when the war stopped the campaign, so it was eventually decided to construct a gymnasium auditorium in 1921 with the remaining funds.
It's a lively bunch. And what else were they going to do?
Right.
Laverne was a sleepy little, or Lordsburg was a sleepy little town. It had a lot of activity, but it was not the kind of activity that we think of today with theaters and TV and everything like that going on. Everybody had to do their own thing as far as entertainment. Sports was big, but it was not at all, I don't think, at the professional level, although I think the athletes were every bit as good. But
This view from the air in 1922 shows the gymnasium auditorium, ladies' hall, and administration building, but it also shows some playing fields. None of the signature live oaks which characterize Laverne's campus today appear to have been planted, although the 4 memorial oaks planted in 1919 in memory of Laverne's First World War casualties must have been there. The white spots in the trees south of the double circular drive in front of the old administration building suggest the dirt court where basketball was played in 1905, seemingly in baseball uniforms and caps and without any visible baskets. The women's cheering section seems to be seated on the ground, but the administration building is prominent in the background. This is also where the tennis club played in 1912, a court clearly lined on the ground. One wonders if the club played in ties and long skirts. Trees on campus consisted primarily of semi-tropical varieties favored at the time, especially palms and eucalyptus. Football commenced in 1921 under coach Claude Ornette, who also taught sociology. By 1922, when this team portrait was shot, the football field had clearly been laid out west of the gymnasium, a spot it would occupy until the Sports Science and Athletics Pavilion was erected some 50 years later. No football field is apparent, however, in the 1922 photograph from the airplane. Indeed, Live Oak Creek and a small extension of B Street that stopped at the creek seems to cut right through where the field should be. We know that Lordsburg Academy had a competitive track team because here it poses behind a table of loving cups which they won in various meets, some of which can be viewed in the trophy cases in the corridor of the history of Laverne athletics, such as this one from the Valley League Track Championship in 1921. In preparing this documentary, I want to thank especially Brian Bess, my colleague in teaching this course, as well as Bill Neal for the many videos that he donated to the archives. I wanted to thank the archives and the archivist for allowing me to use many of those videos, including those listed here. I want to thank the many people who participated in my oral history project, particularly Charles Davis, Jonathan Reed, and Virginia Stark. And finally, I want to acknowledge that many of the photographs that were used in this video came from a number of books, including those listed here.